welcome back, and we are with Phil and Ron from SBI once again answering these questions that I've been really excited to ask and sit down with professionals on. We always try to put a specific place in one of our videos for the questions that we've been asked. We sort of segued into that just before we took a break, and about a gentleman that was asking how he could install the valve guides. I'm going to go ahead and ask some of you. I'm going to ask these guys here some of these questions. I'll read them off, and then I'll let y'all take a swing at them. Okay. So we've got one from a gentleman that says, "I'm rebuilding the head for my 6.0 and got new valve guides. I'm to the point of replacing the valve guides, and I'm not sure if I should press the old ones from the valve cover side towards the combustion side." Okay. And we kind of answered that on the first part. And he said, also, how far do I press the new valve guides? There's no shoulder or anything. I can see a limit to their movement. What have you found that works well for pressing on the guides to get them in or out? And I'm using a hydraulic press. I'm not sure what will press best on the small face of the valve guides to move them without damaging them.
Well, again, and we'll circle back to where you kind of left off. Obviously, these particular, this casting on the 6.0 is integral. There's going to be a boss at the top that's going to be sticking out. There, you're going to have, it's just going to be a place for the spring seat, and it's going to be, it's going to be there. As you said before, Cass, this is an oddball we had to, because nowadays you're going into for a lot of metric size stems. So we had to get a core drill combo that was a 7mm ID or pilot and with a 7/16 OD. We were erring on the side of caution. There's not a whole lot of room in that casting, so to go up to like a 1/2 inch would have been ideal, but there just was not deemed enough room. So we went with a smaller OD of this guide. And with this situation, you're gonna use your core drill. You're gonna eliminate the boss off the top of it and drive it down. More often than not, I see guys using air hammers to tap them into place.
Yeah.
And that's probably much more. It's much quicker than trying to press them. But that's typically common practice.
Gotcha. Now, when you get the guide in place, are you seeing guys that are honing them? The benefits to that?
Yeah, there's definitely some merit. You always want to check guide clearance or your ID of the guide once you're installed.
Right.
Many guides, the longer they are going to have what we call crush in the middle. The two ends are going to be probably pretty good. If you're using a go gauge, it's going to look like you have the right clearance. But down in the middle of that, the material is going to go somewhere. So it's going to try to contract and get on the ID and squeeze the ID. So you're going to have potential clearance issues in the middle of that piece to where it is worth either passing with a finish reamer or a hone. Absolutely.
So the differences between a reamer and a hone, for those listening, and some of the added benefit. Here we'll hone our guides, but I want your take on that.
You get something with a crosshatch, give a nice finish. Absolutely. With certain guides, from our factory, it's going to have a spiral ream to them. We use that, and it's typically going to be on the top end. It's not down here where the port side is. We typically think that's more like a catch-all. So we leave that portion blank for to react as a carbon scrape at the bottom of that guide, not catch all the gunk. When you're working with a spiral ream guide, if you want to maintain the added benefits of the reaming on the ID, depending on how much you're taking out is what I would say, whether you use a finish reamer or a hone. I think light jobs, light duty honing is fantastic. The finished result is fantastic. If you have to get in there and really do something and you have time constraints, then a quick pass with a finish hone will get you where you need to be. And more often than not, it's going to still leave you plenty of spiral ream depth to do its job.
Yeah, oil retention is definitely key, especially you're talking about the EGR valve. Now, this brings me to another question, and of course, this isn't one that we put down on paper, but you just jogged my mind on something, or my memory on something. A lot of talk, and I have so many people in the diesel community, more so in the diesel community than you do in the gasoline world, but they're always talking about crankcase ventilation deletes and removing the crankcase ventilation off of the vehicle. Now, one of the things that we've seen is that added oil that's actually introduced back in, we see it on the back side of the valve as it's going opening and closing, kind of helping to lubricate that. What is your suggestions for the removal of a CCV on the engine? And again, we have so many guys will have blow-by issues, and that's generally where it stems from. You know, you got these guys that have just excessive amounts of blow-by that they can't keep glow plug harnesses in because they're blowing them out of the side of the valve cover.
Right.
And the next thing they do is they go, you know what we need to do is, instead of pumping it back in, let's just pump it into the exhaust. Again, they're masking something that's having a problem. Some of the guys that we've had don't have those blow-by issues, but feel like that reentrance of the oil from the intake might gunk up their intercooler and maybe a adverse effect there. But I don't think they realize sometimes that the end result of where this oil is actually going, and the tribofilm maybe that might occur on the valve seat to decrease the wear, may have some added benefit.
Certainly. I mean, anytime we want to keep these environments as clean as we can.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, the oils today don't have all of the features they had at once.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to do anything we can to keep it as pure, as clean, away from these mating servicing areas. You're going to end up having issues if you get gunk in there. You get into CNG applications, landfill gas, where it's straight out of the ground. Components don't last long in those environments. Bottom line, you're going to end up having issues, deposits, debris, and you're not going to have good true seal. So things are going to start getting really hot and prematurely wearing and failing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely that. We talk about valve failure all the time, but you've seen, Phil, some of the failures from valves, and the problem in the industry is that sometimes you see, like we were talking about on break, Phil has an extensive amount of history and experience with bearing failure.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is so many times people see the effect and blame it as the cause.
Correct. They're very rarely not the same.
Yeah. So tell me, what's your experience through the valve train on that, or even bearings for that matter, that you start seeing some of the cause of failures for valves, or the cause of failures for bearings that guys are looking at it.
Well, one of the things we were talking about during the break also, which is so important when you get to the geometry and talking about the clearance and where you need to be for your precise measurements so that intended environment is going to operate properly. And we don't see a tremendous amount of failures, but one thing that we laugh about when somebody reaches out to us and you get the valve back and the head is sheared off, and you say, okay, we'll take a look at this, because it obviously wasn't that way when it was installed. And before you even ask the question, he says, well, obviously the piston slapped this here. And I said, well, when are those two supposed to meet again? Because I think I missed that part here when we were, talking about what was going to be
Right.
the intended environment.
Right.
And it kind of lightens the situation a little bit there, because those two are never intended, to
Right.
meet like that. And what's going to happen every time when it does? Which one's going to win and which one's not going to win.
Right.
So you have to start to trace that back to understand inside that engine, is it the chicken or the egg? Because
Right.
too many times in our world,
Yeah.
we don't get to see the entire
That's
engine.
right.
So we don't see everything around that that needs to operate within, the same environment.
Yeah.
And it makes it very difficult. We have some of the telltale signs that we can lead to say, well, we think this is what happened here, but so many times when you don't have any of the other mating components to go with it,
Right.
it's very difficult to have that educated, informed conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Are you going to send us back your rocker components? Are you going to
Right.
send back your camshaft? What are we going to get to be able to analyze from this?
Right.
And I used to see that on the bearing side as well. You'd have one
Yeah.
failure and you get back one half shell.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, where are all the other positions? We need to be able to see how this is operating here.
Right.
So that makes it a little difficult.
Yeah, I think bearings are probably the worst thing in the world to try to. All you see is something that's roasted. I mean, obviously, we knew it failed, okay? We knew that we had
Right.
failure. We didn't know that it was the cause of the failure. And they hand you back a piece, and you're like, yeah, there's nothing there. I mean, I agree. Can't run this. I mean,
No, and what is embedded in that also?
Exactly.
That's a specific piece where you're trying to marry two items. You're trying to be hard enough, but soft enough to, embed as well and be conformable, which is difficult to marry those two.
Yeah.
But when you see trash from inside that engine that has now failed and everything is embedded
Right.
into that ID, and you say, well, how do I examine this?
Right.
What do I do? There's
Yeah.
material in here that shouldn't be in here.
Right. Application's everything.
Very much so.
Application's everything.
Very much so.
Yeah. People call us all the time and say, okay, I'm going to install a, whatever the part may be, a 472 charge or whatever. And it can be engine components. What kind of valve spring should I use? I'm going to get the heaviest valve spring I possibly can, because I'm going to put a charger on. But the application is everything. The answer is yes and no.
Right.
And people sometimes I think get a little frustrated with you because they just want that spit out that answer for me so that I can go and I can Google search it and find out what's the nearest parts store near me. And we're not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to give a person a hard time, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right answer. And in order, the data is only going to be as good as the input, garbage in, garbage out kind of thing.
Well, there's so many variables.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do with it? You need to have some sort of understanding of what it's going to be experienced. Or what kind of cam you're putting in? What are you trying to get out of this horsepower? What are you trying to use it for in order to aid those decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another thing that we the Duramax guys, the press fits, the different applications for the Cummins guys, the ones that we're seeing the valve seats fall out like that.
Yeah. We looked at a lot of those. Obviously, it was a huge occurrence for these OEMs to go out there and start having valve seats drop out. Through our testing, we had found that the brunt of those are going to be a powder metal type insert, and we see very, very minimal press fit being put onto the factories. Some as low as 3 to 3.5 thousandths. In these applications, and we've always lived and died by 5 thousandths press fit on a cast iron head, and then 7 thousandths for an aluminum head, and we know they don't go anywhere. You certainly don't want to cheat that and go anything less. And there are also a lot of folks that think about putting more for extra additional safety. I would also, advise not to go too extreme either. It does not allow that seat to expand and contract and do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
So they typically will yield, and then you will have a fallout as well. So there's a happy medium in everything, and understanding what you're working on and what it's going to go through, I think, is everything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a Goldilocks equation. Not too much, not too little.
That's right. It's just got to be right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's it's application again is everything. And there's so many working components to this that it is it's a working awesome. Everything has to be cohesive. And there's a lot more to it than what people really realize. It's not just a matter of buying the best of all components, like we were talking about, the embeddability of the bearing, and a guy that's driving around town, you were saying on break, whereas that application may be fine on a quarter-mile strip. It's not going to be what you're wanting. It's not going to be the most optimal decision or the choice for the job.
Well, correct. The harder you get, you generally lose your embeddability.
Yeah.
It's the way it works.
Yeah.
So it's neat to hear you say, though, as you talk about your customer base and to understand to ask those questions up front. And, that's music to our ears for you to take that time, whether they don't quite understand it yet and why you may be asking that, though.
Right.
But to take that little bit of time for knowledge to understand, so I give you and provide you the best product possible here at the end of the day. And that's really key, because I can tell you not everybody knows.
I'm going to turn this valve cover around for you and kind of let you see what that looks like. Hopefully that shows up good. So what we have is a spray jet for each individual rocker arm. It's fed by an orifice fitting right here that'll go into this elbow. What that does is that regulates how much oil pressure. So coming off from the oil cooler supply to the turbocharger, it's a very small amount of oil that runs through a restrictor or an orifice here. And that orifice actually goes into these jets, and it's a machined galley that runs all the way through the valve cover, as you can see. Now that does dual purposes. One is we noticed that after we began to put oil on top of the valve cover, through the valve cover on top of the rocker arms, what that would do is that would muffle the engine down about 10 decibels at idle, which is pretty drastic. It's a huge audible difference. You can definitely tell when one of our valve covers are on any engine without popping the hood, just because of how much quieter it is. The second thing is obviously that it eliminates the issue that they had from the factory of the rocker arm failure, which can prevent engine damage. The third thing that this actually does is it provides, because it runs through the valve cover itself now on the second gens. Now note, this is only on the second gens, and that's the only ones that we've been making second gens for a few months now. But what this does is this oil galley that's actually running all the way through, it provides a heat sink to the rest of the valve cover. So we're actually seeing oil temperatures drop 5 to 6 degrees from this valve cover itself.
All right, guys. So one thing that we definitely wanted to cover and touch base is what really sets SBI apart. What makes them better from their competition? And we're always looking to get the competitive edge and use the best vendor or manufacturer, I should say, as possible. And quality control is imperative. It's paramount above all things. So what are some of the things that SBI is doing in order to ensure that?
Well, we're fortunate. We've been partnered up with our manufacturing facilities for many, many years. However, we can never become complacent or make it easy. We've got checks and balances in place. First and foremost, we maintain the original standards set forth for the company when it comes to the OE standards that we adopted at conception. So we've got a skilled team of quality control inspectors led by a quality control manager, and it's in a separate entity. We've got a clean room there. We're going to sample certain percentages of all incoming shipments. It doesn't matter if you've never had a mess up, if they've never had an issue with this piece, we're going to dig in and start working on it. We've got optical comparators, we've got Minatoyo Rockwell hardness machines, we've got profilometers for surface finish, we've got all kinds of fixtures for checking concentricity and run out. So that team is very, very busy all the time. So we take it very seriously, and they are our gatekeepers. There's nothing worse than having something that gets through and it ends up being a customer that has to find an error or something that's not quite right. We're going to do everything we can to prevent that.
Yeah, that's it's so easy to think that the first one's right and then just keep going. And boy, that's an expensive mistake.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's you get one shot with a customer,
Right.
and you're trying to build that confidence, and the only way to truly do that and be able to sleep at night is through quality control and testing, and those processes that are in place are imperative. That's something that we find ourselves doing all the time, trying to figure out what's a better way to do this. What can we do to ensure that this we can like I say, we can sleep at night. We know that we've got a quality product that we're consistently putting out. So that's good to hear. That
every product category has got a procedure in place, and any of the inspectors can take a piece. They're trained in all parts, all machines, and all equipment to jump in. Whether there's an absence or we have a huge influx, that's typically the way it goes. It's feast or famine, especially in the market today, and trying to get our supply chains firmed up with deliveries. You might have 40 different skids out on the floor, and then the next week it's 2. So that ability for them to take on massive amounts of work and get through them in an efficient manner, but very accurate manner. I always tell our QC guys, accuracy first, speed will come later.
Right.
Don't worry about how many pieces you inspect today. Just make sure those pieces are accurate and done correctly.
Yeah.
They do a great job. They really are the backbone, of that. As we were talking about injector cups earlier, it's one thing to be able to measure the critical dimensions to make sure that you're not off from where you are. But what about understanding whether that is, magnetic or non-magnetic?
Correct.
So understanding the material as well, it's just paramount. And Ryan coming from that background, so to have that as him leading the organization today, but that's where he cut his teeth. So to still have that close tie with that group, it really means a lot.
Yeah. Well,
And these are, as he said, these are facilities, people we have partnered with for decades, 30 years.
All over.
And when their shipments come in, it still gets broken down like it's the very first shipment. It's the very first time we have done business together. And I think that speaks volumes because you don't gain complacency and you still have your foot on that pedal and you're going to analyze that. Doesn't matter how many pieces have come through our door.
Yeah.
And very rarely is something off, but having that close eye and also understanding the relationship with our facilities worldwide and building those relationships are why you very rarely have something that would go awry. But if you didn't check it, you don't know. And what goes in that blue and yellow box at the end of the day is going to be the utmost quality every time.
Yeah. Well, we've had tremendous success with SBI, and we greatly appreciate the hard work that you guys put in and the product that you put out. So, and it goes hand in hand. You know, there is a formula and a recipe for success and for a great product. And you've definitely found that. So we greatly appreciate your time today, and we appreciate just having you guys here and answering these questions. And it's going to be great content for our listeners and our viewers. So we appreciate you tuning in today. And you can go on Facebook, check us out. Like I said, choateperformance.com is our website. We're on Instagram. You can follow us there. The link will be below. Give a like and a follow to the guys at SBI. And we appreciate you guys again, and look forward to it next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.
All right.